Wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you about verbs. For those of you that are not fans of verbs, hopefully by the end of the session today, you will be. I want to take a moment before we get started to thank GMAT Club for hosting this session today and making this possible for me to reach all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with this session and move through, kind of give you some housekeeping tips before we jump into the content. So the goals of today's sessions is to really demonstrate the application of our meaning-based approach that we use at eGMAT using the storytelling method. And what I refer to as storytelling is the way we need to think about all the sentences as we are reading through them and assessing that meaning. And each sentence is simply that. It's a story that the author is telling in order to be able to communicate something to us. And verbs are simply the events in the story. And we know that when we are talking to somebody and they don't have their events organized correctly, I often think of my grandfather at this point in time, then we have a difficult time understanding the story. And so when we know how to sequence our events and how to express them in the right manner, then we absolutely have a coherent story and we can really help the author communicate that meaning. So I'm trying to get over here to the comments and see if I can see your guys' comments, but for some reason it's not opening for me. So I'm going to keep moving forward really quickly. So the flow of the session today, how we're going to kind of do this session is we're going to have a warm-up. This is going to be a basic warm-up. We will post a link to the warm-up in the comment section. You're to click on that link and you will answer the questions there in the poll. And then from there, once everybody's gotten the majority of the answers in the poll, we'll go ahead and go through that warm-up and talk about the verb tenses. These are going to be more of your simple verb tenses in the warm-up session. And then after we discuss those 3 questions, we're going to do a sprint. This is where you are going to be solving full-length original sentences. They are hard sentences. In the sprint, again, there will be a link. We're going to ask you to please not post your answers in the chat, but to post them in the polls. Once about 2 minutes to solve those sprint questions, then we will discuss and solve those 3 questions, and then we will do a final sprint, which consists of 2 questions. And then after those 2 questions, we'll have the takeaways from each sprint. So obviously the goal from sprint 1 is to apply the takeaways that you learn in sprint 2. Is hopefully everybody ready to go? I'm, again, having trouble getting, the comments are not coming up on my screen, so I'm having trouble seeing. So I've got a Tria here who is supporting me, so I'm going to, hopefully he can see your guys' comments and let me know if there's any issues or problems. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully open the warm-up session, the warm-up link posted for you guys, and let you guys get started with that warm-up section. Best of luck with this. I'm going to give you guys about 15 more seconds to solve these warm-up questions. I see about 3 people have answered so far. Oh, there's a few more. You guys lock your answers in on these, and we'll get moving in just about 10 seconds. Okay, so let's take a look at these questions. These are very basic verb tenses. So hopefully these weren't too stressful for you. Your instructions here are to think about the author's trying to express. And we're going to talk about that intent behind the author's expression and how to really decide if the verb is correct or incorrect here. So for the first question, the multicultural United States is a heterodox nation. So for this question, we have about an 85% accuracy rate with this question. So that is not bad at all. The intent here is to express something, obviously. But as we read through the sentence, we see that the author is trying to express a fact. And we know that we are getting this expression of fact because of the use of this simple present tense verb. Okay, so simple present tense is what we're going to use to express fact and to express truths that we know are true for all time. So if I was to say, the world is round, that is expressing a fact or a truth. And so we always use simple present tense to do that. Same if we were using past tense, it would be a truth from the past that has ended in that past. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the second question. And here again, about an 85% accuracy. So we're pretty standard across the board. And as we read through this sentence, we see Victoria Woodhull had been the first woman to attempt to run for president. And here again, we see a statement of, you guessed it, fact. Okay, now had been is what we typically refer to as the past perfect tense. And we use this when we're sequencing events on timelines to relate events that have a relationship, that are obviously sequenced together and need that organization within the story that's being told. But here, the use of had been doesn't have another action in the sentence that the author is telling us about. So we are not going to use the past perfect tense here. We're going to use the simple past tense, was, to express that Victoria Woodhull was the first woman to attempt to run for president. Now, this happened in the past. This is a past event. The time span of this event is over. We don't have any type of continuing. So here we would just need a simple past tense verb to express a simple historical fact from the past. All right, so hopefully everybody's clear on that. And we're going to move on to our last warm-up sentence. This sentence is a little bit more complicated, and our statistics show us. So this sentence is 69% accuracy. And the intent in this sentence is to tell even more of a story. So as we read through this sentence, we see by the time he moved to Paris, James Baldwin had endured the cruelty of Jim Crow laws. Now, this sentence is definitely, we have two events. So two actions happening in this story that the author is telling us. And the author wants these actions to occur in proper order. So the intent here is to tell us what happened first, what is the number one event, and the number two event. Okay, so here our intent is that of sequence. We have to sequence these events. So when we need to sequence events, we use the past perfect. And think of past perfect, especially as a story that has multiple events happening in it and is on a timeline. So if we have our timeline here and we're looking at our story, we see that by the time he moved to Paris, so we have a move to Paris somewhere on our timeline. James Baldwin, so our subject of our story is James Baldwin, had endured the cruelty of Jim Crow laws. With the use of the present or the past perfect here, had endured, tells us that this is taking place prior to Baldwin moving to Paris. So this would be our number 1 event, and this would be our number 2 event. So we get that clear sequencing of events from this storyline. Okay, so that being said, hopefully we are good to go and we understand that structure and the use of the past perfect. We're going to get ready to move forward. A couple of announcements that we have as we are moving forward with this. We are going to open up for you all some supplemental lessons so you can get more in depth with these verb tenses over the weekend. So this Saturday only, we are going to have our verb tenses 1 files open for free. So you guys and gals out there can learn your simple, continuous, and perfect forms of all the verb tenses. It'll go into past, present, future, all together and kind of give you really that exposure that you need to see what you need to do for that ground foundational work on verb tenses. Okay, so that being said, you definitely want to access that this weekend. Again, the free trial for these verb tenses files is only open for 1 day, so you want to make sure that you get to that. Okay, so we are going to get started with sprint number 1. If you need paper, pencil, whatever you need to get started with verb to solve these questions and really pay attention to those verbs, we definitely want to do so now. Get that ready to go before we open up this link for you guys. Again, these are official sentences. They are on the hard side, so hopefully we're good to go. Gonna ask Atria to start that. Okay, link has been shared, so you guys can open that form up. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes to solve these questions. It's about 2 minutes per question. Best of luck. Okay, about 30 seconds left. So if we have anyone else who is going to lock in their answers, now would be the time to do it. We're going to get started working through these solutions in just about 15 seconds. All right, it looks like we have all the responses. We're going to go ahead and get busy solving these and get to work. So you guys had all of these questions in your poll. So let's take a look at the fundamental concept that we are seeing behind question number 1. So for this fundamental concept question, I need you to tell me, and we're going to have a link pop up so you guys can answer this question in a poll. Which sentence is correct? You're choosing the correct usage of this sentence. So is sentence number 1 correct? 550 million people were killed in World War II, or 50 million people have been killed in World War II. I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to pick this correct question on this concept, and then we'll go ahead and discuss it. Make sure you guys are clicking on that link down below to tell me which sentence is correct. We've only had about 15 responses. Let's get a few more locked in. About 10 more seconds. All right, those of you that are putting your answers in the chat, let's make sure that we're putting them in the poll, please. We don't want to give answers away while people are still working. That's the teacher in me coming out. Okay, so let's take a look at this fundamental concept. So 50 million people were killed in World War II versus 50 million people have been killed. So here again, we have the expression of a fact, past tense. So the use of the simple past tense were here is absolutely correct because this event is over. That time has expired. So we no longer have any type of progressive action. In World War II, we know that this many people were killed. So we have that time period that is given to us. So we need simple past tense. Sentence 2 is incorrect because of the fact that we've used have been killed. That's expressing that continuing action, okay? That ongoing action or ongoing effect. So we need to remember that that present perfect tense is going to give us that continuity of action. And we don't want that when we are expressing a fact from the past. So think of past perfect here kind of as something that goes through the decades or transcends time in a story and really communicates that. Where the past perfect, you've got a firm line, a hard stop. This is in the past and it's over and done with. Okay, so hopefully that helps clarify for everyone the use of the past perfect here versus the simple past tense and when we need that. So it looks like most of you have a pretty strong grasp on this because 96% of you got this question correct. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Remember the intent, so we just said, was to express a fact. The meaning here is that this happened in the past, so we don't have the continuing action. We have a hard stop. Nothing is moving forward with us in time, okay? So if you get confused between these two tenses, that hard stop of telling a story, that presentation of a past event that stays in the past, it is behind us, always comes with the simple past tense. So let's take a look at proposition 13. And in this sentence, we need to really do some work on our meaning. We're going to use the sentence structure to start breaking that meaning down. And we see, partly as a result of proposition 13, which severely limits property tax increases. So I know that this proposition has taken place, and now I'm being told exactly what this proposition does. This proposition limits property tax increases, which would be a wonderful thing. California has come more and more to rely on personal income taxes for its revenues. Income taxes have increased from 18% of the state's general fund in 1962 to 48% by 2002. So again, we have to stop and say, okay, in this story, and this story is not as exciting as some of them, we're talking about taxes, but in this story, what is the author trying to communicate to us? He's telling us that increasing reliance on income taxes for revenues have taken place over a span of time. So when I'm dealing with data, I always like to get the visual graph in my head. And I know that it started here in 1962 is the start of this period. And in 1962, these taxes were 18%. So that meaning is very straightforward. And then these taxes rose from 18% in 1962 to 48% in 2002. So we have this increase. It's happened from 1962 to 2002, when the increase reached 48% in 2002. So this is factual information, right? This has happened in the past, right? 2002 is over and done with. We have that hard stop here. Okay, this isn't a continuation of an increase. This increase is 100% happened and stopped. Okay, so as we move forward and we start analyzing and looking at, okay, have we expressed this event in the proper way? Is it an intent to express this fact, or is it continuing action here? Okay, so click on that link that just popped up in the chat and tell me, what do you guys think? Is this author continuing the action, or is this author expressing a fact? Give you guys about 20, 30 seconds to think of that. Look at the sentence really carefully here. All right. Any other responses that we're going to get in? Last few seconds here. Okay, let me look at how you guys responded. Let me refresh these results one last time. So it looks like 81% of you have answered this correctly. So let's talk about what this answer actually is. We have a fact being expressed. All right. Now, sometimes when we see this arrow and this movement, we automatically think continuing action. And the use of the present perfect have increased is giving us that indication of continuity. But if we look at the sentence and the story that's being told, we see the word from right here, indicating to us that it is from 18% to 48%. So we have this hard stop because we've reached 2002 here. Everything's happened in the past. Nothing is continuing to increase today. There's nothing to express ongoing action here. Okay, so we have to have that past tense verb to express this fact and not to have this continuity of action. So the use of have increased is indeed wrong here. We need to find an answer choice that gives us the simple past tense. So let's start working through our answer choice analysis to really see where the errors are in this sentence. And I want to see what our accuracy rate was here. So for this question, it looks like 50% of you landed on the right answer. So I'm going to go ahead and put this data down here. Okay. And our next most popular choice was choice A with 18%. So not too bad, but that tells me that some of us are having a harder time than others really understanding where this stop is happening and how we need to express this. So let's go ahead and look at these answer choices pretty closely. So we know choice A because of our meaning analysis and our understanding of the story that's being told. We're going to reject because of this continuing of action. And we know that this action stopped in 2002. Now, if you're sitting there and you're going, well, what if it said 2020? The first thing to keep in mind is we don't get the option of what ifs on GMAT. We have to go with the sentence that's presented to us. And the second thing is, even if it was 2020, we have the stop with 18%. That's where this stop has happened, which tells us this data is totaled and it's over and done with. Still would be the simple past tense. Now, choice B, we're going to reject again because of the use of have increased. Choice C, we can reject because of have increased, and also because we have this use of and here, which is telling us that taxes have increased, and by 2002, we're up to 48%. We have all this wordiness over here. They've added an additional verb in here that's not needed, so we can reject based on the use of the present perfect, but also if that wasn't enough for you, all this wordiness over here is another reason to get rid of this sentence and the addition of a new verb. That's just not needed. Then we have choice D. We actually have the correct verb choice here. So I'm a little surprised more people didn't land on this answer choice. However, when we look, it says from 18% and by 2002. So we're missing that from to. Remember, we're expressing from point A to point B, and we don't have that to here. So that piece is missing. And again, we have all this extra wordiness with an additional verb being added here, which is not needed. So we can go ahead and reject choice D based on kind of that expression error, and note that GMAT does love to do that. They'll give you the right verb, but they'll throw another error in there. So you really have to make sure that, yes, your story is being told with the proper sequence of events, but it also is being expressed in the proper manner. That's super important. And then choice E is indeed our correct answer. The teacher and me still love smiley faces. So those of you that landed on choice E, nice job. We have the use of the simple past tense increased, and again, you'll notice the expression from to 48%. Okay, so well done, those of you. Hopefully, it's kind of sunk in here that we need to use that hard stop when we're presenting factual information. Okay. So I see some people have just joined. Welcome. I can finally see the comments. We're working through the questions of our first sprint. So just kind of jump on in and make yourself comfortable to solve some challenging questions. We're going to move on. So you can see those answer choices there, incorrect. And here's that problem with choice D, which is a really popular answer that people land on, which we've kind of already discussed. So let's move on to our question about vanishing species. So, well, let me check the statistics on how we did on this one. It is looking like we've got about 55% of you landed on the correct answer. So that is good to know. This is an interesting question. This is a hard question. So it looks like choice B was our second most popular answer choice. So let's get into this question a little bit and really focus on this, because once you get through the meaning here, it becomes really, really interesting to see how all of this is being expressed. And I love this question because it presents such a good visual story that should keep you pretty interested. So 500 million different species of living creatures have appeared on Earth, nearly 99% of them vanishing. So this is a very short sentence, but creates such imagery that these creatures have appeared on Earth and 99% of them have vanished. So let's think about this. 500 million different species have appeared on Earth, and 99% of these have vanished. So I want you to think to yourselves for a moment. This is where I think that we wish we could actually get to an actual visualization here. Did all these, and answer this to yourself because I know we can't all put it in the chat, but did these species all get here at one time? Did they all, boom, we had 500 million species, and then boom, they disappeared? Or has this happened as a continuity over time? Okay, so I want you to think about that as far as how you see these species appearing on Earth. Can we infer? Okay, so no, it is vanishing, but I'm saying when you think about it, are they vanishing over time, or did they boom, all go away at one time? So I'm not trying to say or mess you up with your verbs at all. And as far as understanding the sentence, as far as being written in a current time period, if there are word parameters in the sentence that gives you a current year, then you want to go with the dates presented in the sentence. But other than that, you have to assume that it's current information, if that makes sense. So let me ask you guys, and gals, can you infer that the total number of species that have ever appeared on Earth is 500 million? Okay, so there's a link that's been popped in. You guys can click on that link to put your answer in the poll. Can we assume that the total number of species that have ever appeared on Earth is 500 million from the context of the sentence? Give you guys about a minute to think about this. Look at the structure of the sentence. Okay, about 10 more seconds. A few more responses trickling in. Okay, so let's talk about this. We absolutely can. Okay, it is telling us that they have appeared. So we get that sense of time. So let's look at this reference sentence really quickly, because this is one of those GMAT sentences that actually has real world application to it. We can kind of take the structure and apply it to real world. So only 30% of 1,000 students who have completed the inference module have excelled in the final post-session exercise. So in this case, we have the universe, right? We have our total universe in this sentence is 1,000 students, okay? And 30% of the 1,000 who have completed the inference modules excelled, all right? Makes sense. Of 1,000 students who completed the inference module, only 30% have excelled in the final post exercise. Now, in this situation, our set is 1,000 students. That doesn't mean that only 1,000 students have done this, but we have a set of 1,000 students. of the 1,000 students who completed. So our total amount is no longer a total universe. Does that hopefully that makes sense and everybody can see the difference here. And it's the difference of looking at a full group versus a sampling of a group. All right. So in choice A, 500 million different species of living creatures have appeared on Earth, nearly 99% of them vanishing, is that same structure of the complete universe that some of you were telling us. Okay? And choice B gives us that sense that we only have a sampling and we don't have the entire universe. So really understanding that meaning and how this is being expressed is going to be really, really important in solving a sentence like this and actually communicating in real world life, understanding. So if we look at this choice in choice B, from choice B, can you still infer that 500 million is the total number of species that have appeared on Earth? Read choice B very, very carefully, and then you're going to get that link's going to pop up. Answer in that poll. Let's get a few more responses in here. Again, take a close look at choice B. Is the total number of species that have appeared on Earth, is that still what we can infer? About 10 more seconds. Okay. And it looks like most of you are thinking the same way I am. Absolutely not. We cannot tell. Okay. This structure here and the way it's communicated here gives us that sense of a sampling, and that is a meaning distortion. So we work our way through choice B, and right away we can see that we have a meaning distortion there. So let's work through the rest of these answer choices. Choice E is indeed our correct answer. We have the proper usage down here of the 500 million different species of living creatures that have appeared. So we get this sense that over the course of time, these creatures have appeared. They have not all come at one time. They have appeared over the course of time. So we get that continuity of action. Okay, so that is needed in this case to show us that continuation. Nearly 99% have vanished. So again, continuity over time, this 99% have vanished. It has not all happened at one time. We don't have that hard stop here that we saw in that previous question. All right, so we talked about choice A and choice B pretty much in detail, in depth. Choice C, we have that appeared. Again, that appeared gives us that sense of finality, that this boom, it happened at one time in the past. And so therefore, that is not giving us the proper expression to tell this story that these species came through the continuity of time. And then in choice D, our parallel structure for choice D, you can see it there. We have, you know, if we had of 100 apples, 80 are rotten, or of 100 apples, 80 of them are rotten. That's a similar parallel structure to choice D, where we get that error and that confusion in the meaning. And you can also look at the use of over here is super redundant. So even though we have the proper verb tense here, we've been introduced with other errors that we need to be aware of for choice D. So we're going to reject choice D on those grads. So hopefully you guys are all seeing the storytelling that's coming through and how you have to really determine what story the author is trying to say. So if that story's events need to continue over the course of time, you're going to use the present perfect. Versus if the events of the story had that hard stop in the past, you're going to use the simple past tense. So let's take a look at a fundamental concept that is involved in our third question of this sprint. And we're going to have another link pop up for you guys to tell me which of these sentences is correct. And it just came up. Awesome. Awesome support from the tech team. So give you guys about a minute or two to get your answers locked in for these. Okay, about 15 more seconds. All right, if you're going to get any answers locked in for this fundamental concept question, go ahead and do that now. All right, so let's talk about this one. It looks like from your responses that most of you did a good job really kind of seeing the differences of these two sentences, but let's go through it really quickly just to make sure that fundamental concept is fresh in our mind. So our first sentence says, until a strict schedule was imposed, kids had been allowed to watch television for hours at a stretch. So the thing I want you to be thinking about here is the use of the verb, oops, my slide jumped on me there, had been allowed, okay? And is the sense that if I say kids had been allowed to watch television for hours at a time, are they still allowed to do that? Does had been allowed give us that sense that this action is still permitted today? And that being said, you know, until does present a bit of a sequence marker. So we have that working with us too, but even more so, the sense of had been allowed implies in its tense that this is no longer allowed. Now, if we look at the sentence for sentence 2, until a strict schedule was imposed, kids were allowed to watch television for hours at a time. Now here, we have that sense that, okay, they had permission to do this, and that permission continued until the strict schedule was imposed. So there's definitely a different sense of the expression of this sentence. And the same for the second sentence. Joe asked for a slice from the pizza that Amy had eaten. So logically, we're going to think about the verb here that's being told. Pizza had eaten. Amy's eaten the pizza. Pizza's gone. Amy was really hungry. Is it logical for Joe to ask for a slice? if the pizza had already been eaten. Think of that logic, because we can see that it's not logical. It's not logical to impose a schedule if the children are no longer allowed to watch television for hours at a stretch. Parents out there will understand that. And it's not logical to ask for a slice of pizza if the pizza had already been eaten. So with that concept in mind, we're going to dig in to the question on phosphates. And so let's jump right into the meaning. We have a 1972 agreement. So we know some type of agreement was made in 1972 between Canada and the United States. So these two countries have made this agreement. This agreement reduced the amount of phosphates that municipalities had been allowed to dump into the Great Lakes. So we see very similar wording that we had in that fundamental concept. So you should be thinking about that fundamental idea that's happening. So a 1972 agreement reduced the phosphates amount allowed to be dumped in the Great Lakes. We know that. So here's the question that we should have been thinking about as we answered this question, and we thought about how this story about these phosphates regulation is being told. The sense that you get from had been allowed. Okay, we're gonna answer this question really quickly. What sense, now that we've gone through that concept file, what is the sense there that we're getting? I want you guys to think about that sense. And as you're thinking about that, are they allowed to dump? Right? They were no longer, if they had been allowed to dump, they are no longer allowed to dump. So the action happened and got replaced by some other action. So just like the television or just like the pizza, how can we ask for a slice that has been eaten, right? How can we reduce the amount of something that we're no longer allowed to dump? So we have a complete confusing meaning distortion by the way our friend, the author, is telling us this story. All right. So we know right away that had been allowed is incorrect. So let me know if you guys want to see your scores. I'll put how you did in the chat box if you guys want to see how you did on this question. Let me check your data from this question. It looks like 51% of you answered this correctly. So nice work there. And our second most popular answer was choice A. So if you landed on choice A, I'm guessing you didn't get that illogical correlation between had been allowed, right? So we know we are going to reject choice A because of that illogical meaning that we just discussed, right? We can't reduce something. This agreement can't reduce something that has already been reduced. Choice B, we have had been dumping. And again, the same meaning is being communicated here. All right. Not many of you landed on choice B, but if you selected choice A, choice B has that same meaning. So I want you to really think about, why were you willing to accept choice A and reject choice B? Because if it had been dumping, that's the same thing as had been allowed. And the logic in that verb tense is still illogical. We can't change something or reduce something that's already been stopped. Now, choice C has an interesting question for you to think about here, because we have reduces, and we know that this is a 1972 treaty. So the present tense is completely illogical here. This is not something that is happening at the current time. It reduced it in the past. That was that hard stop in the past. This agreement came out, we had that hard stop. So the use of the present tense is absolutely incorrect in choice C. Choice D, absolutely our correct answer. Okay, we have the use of that past tense verb and the use of are allowed to dump. So here, our event is being clearly expressed in this story. This agreement reduced the amount of the phosphates that municipalities are allowed to dump. So what we are allowed to dump if we're part of that municipality was reduced by this agreement. And then choice E, again, is incorrect because we have this present tense reduces, and we know that this agreement was in the past tense. Okay? So I see some people saying, is an agreement still in force? We have nothing in the sentence to say that this agreement has been overturned. So we're going to have to go with yes. There's nothing to indicate to us that this agreement has ended. So, and if you're confused with the use of are allowed in the correct answer choice, you just kind of have to think about the fact that there's nothing that's saying that this is over or giving us that hard stop of the agreement. So reduced in the past, we are allowed to do it now. So hopefully that kind of helps you really see how this story piece of this sentence is put together. Okay, so hopefully you guys are feeling pretty confident. Let's talk about the takeaways from this, because this is the learning that I want you to really apply to the next piece. When you're reading these sentences, I want you to visualize this story. The author is your friend, just talking to you, communicating this story. Think of it as an old grandpa sitting on the porch telling you this story, and visualize the events in your mind and create that visual picture. And to determine the nature of the events and how they need to occur in this story and what's intended by the author. And if you can do that, then it becomes really simple for you to be like, oh, okay, hold on. This has that hard stop. You know, my buddy, the author, telling me this story got a little bit confused. Or no, this doesn't have a hard stop. This shows continuation over time. I need to express this. Or am I sequencing multiple events, and what is being expressed with that? So really, you have to think of those timelines. You have to think of that intended communication, and then help construct the events of the sentence with that in mind. And visualizing the sentence is really one of the best ways to do that. So here are our big takeaways. We had these 3 questions. Per the context of the first question, we knew that we were stating a fact about these income taxes. In our second question, we expressed all of something, not a sampling. So we had that expression of an entire universe. And in our third question with the phosphates, we have that this action is not completed or replaced. So the verbs we use to express these types of things, right? We see income tax increased from A to B by a certain time in the past. 500 million species have appeared, we talked about, over the course of time. And municipalities are still allowed to dump when the agreement was reached, but then it was reduced, okay? And so now we are allowed to dump what the agreement says. So the verb tense is used to express this. In the first sentence, we saw the need for the present perfect. Okay, that gives us the continuity that these species have come over the course of time. You can kind of see them appearing and then vanishing into the mist if you really give that visualization. Then we see income taxes, the simple past. That's stating that fact that ended in 2002. We had that hard stop because the data was collected and we knew we had that hard end. And then again, with our last question, use of the past perfect really messed that meaning up and how we were communicating there. So understand the usages of the verb tense. If you try to memorize a formula, this plus this equals this, or this, present tense is always this, past tense is always that, that may work for a really simple sentence if you're memorizing those grammar rules. But when we get into these more complex sentences that are telling us stories with multiple events, it's not going to work for you any longer because the rules will get all jumbled up. So if you really think of it as telling a story, use that meaning and use that storytelling of, okay, how do I tell this story with these verbs? How do I sequence this? that will help get you through. It'll build your confidence, and then suddenly verbs aren't so hard anymore. So I want you guys to take these takeaways with you, and understanding these usages, and not rules, rules, rules. The English language has so many rules. I've taught English and grammar for over 24 years. There's so many rules. And if you try to memorize the rules, they will get jumbled up, especially when you're under pressure in an exam environment. You don't want to have to try to be recalling rules. But if you can set this formula aside and embrace this meaning and really think about what's being communicated and how to tell this story, you will be good to go. So don't forget, you can do the basics in the free supplemental lessons on Saturday, only tomorrow. So make sure that you get that free trial. The access link just popped up in the chat. You can learn the simple tenses, continuous tenses, perfect forms, past, present, and future. It gives you all those verby things that you need to have that basic knowledge. Okay, so definitely take advantage of this. This is a great thing that we don't do every day. So definitely get that link and take that free access for tomorrow. Also, coming up, for those of you who maybe are setting your sentence correction aside and you're getting ready to start with reading comprehension, we have an RC course webinar that is tomorrow. So less than 24 hours to help you start excelling in RC. They will be demonstrating how to improve your ability to comprehend. Probably can improve it about 5 times from where you're sitting right now with just a few key strategies that they're going to be teaching you, which you see right there on the screen. So again, the link is in the chat. Please make sure you click on that to register and get yourself signed up for that. Great opportunities for you to kind of bring your skills up to that next level as you move forward with your GMAT preparation. So that being said, we also have the final gift for you today. You can get a personalized study plan working with a certified expert to help you really path your way to how to conquer this exam. And this team is amazing at how they work with students and really help them figure out where to work to improve their scores and come up with a plan that works for each individualized student. So there are a limited number of spots. So it is on a first come, first served basis. So make sure, again, the link is in the chat right over there. So make sure you guys grab that link so you can seize the opportunity to work with our strategy team, which again, I'm amazed at how they help students all the time. They're quite the team. So definitely a personalized approach is something everybody can benefit from as you're preparing and studying. So please, please take advantage of that. And with that being said, I think we are ready for Sprint 2. We have a couple more questions for you guys. So I want to make sure that stand up, take a stretch if you need to. Again, just housekeeping rules. You are not putting your answer choices in the chat. You're going to click on that link that just popped up for the Sprint 2 questions. And that link is going to take you to a form. You're going to fill that form out, hit submit, and then come back here and we will discuss those questions. It's about 2 questions. So it's only 2 questions. I'm going to give you about 4.5 minutes. So about 2 minutes per question, 2:15. These are hard level questions. So make sure you take your time and you think through them. Best of luck. Okay, I'm going to give you guys about another minute. We don't have too many answers in yet, so keep working at it. About another minute. $30 remaining. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started with our analysis of question 1. So our stats for question 1 looks like nobody selected choice A. So I'm going to let you guys see kind of where we're at as we're moving forward. Choice B, we got about 10%. Choice C, we're sitting at 60%. Choice D, 25%. And choice E is 5%. So not bad. It looks like you guys are getting pretty good with your verbs. I'm not going to give away the correct answer just yet, but it looks like most of you did a pretty good job here. So that kind of gives it away in and of itself, right? So that is the second question, which we will get to, but let's discuss the magpie attack first and foremost. So this sentence is pretty interesting. I think the meaning is pretty straightforward. Hopefully you guys found it to be as well. So we have the first detailed study of magpie attacks in Australia indicates that by the time they had reached adulthood, 98% of men and 75% of women born in the country have been attacked by the birds. So we have these birds that attack men and women in their childhood or their youth, which I'm afraid of birds, so this sounds totally horrible to me. But a large portion of people in Australia have this happen. So when we have a sentence that gives us dates like this and time periods, forming a timeline can become super, super important. Again, that visualization in your head, scratch it out on a piece of paper if you need to help you really see, okay, how is this being communicated? What do I need here to communicate this? So we have 98% attacked by the birds by the time they reached adulthood. Okay. So 98% of men, 75% of women. So is there any ambiguity or confusion about the logical sequencing here? And there's going to be a poll that pops up. Go ahead and click on that and let me know what you guys think. Are you feeling like, wait, are these attacks? When are these attacks happening? Is there any confusion there about any ambiguity of when these attacks are actually taking place? I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to a minute to answer that. Probably 30 seconds. All right, about 10 more seconds. All right, so let's take a look at this. There shouldn't be any ambiguity. The sequence is pretty, the communication is pretty well organized here as far as what is intended and the order in which they are doing this. So the use of by the time helps out here. Have been attacked by the birds. So we do have some sequencing issues happening in choice A. So when we take a look at choice A, it's really important to say, notice that we have the past perfect being used here in the second portion of the sentence, and that's been used incorrectly, right? We want, if we have had, so we have the past perfect in the first part, had reached, and then we have had been attacked. But we know that we need the past perfect for the earlier of the two events. So event 1, event 2. So this is really a case of our authors use the verb tenses that need to be used, but they've used them in the wrong order. The story's being told in the wrong order because according to this, they're reaching adulthood first and then they're being attacked here. And that's not the logical meaning. Okay, so we can reject choice A on those grounds. Choice B, if you are asking yourself here, in the presence of had been attacked, what is the past verb tense? Because we have had been attacked, but we know that when we're sequencing events, we need had been attacked as number 1, yes, but number 2, reached adulthood, still needs to be in that past tense, and it's not. So we reject choice B on that verb tense there because we don't have that proper correlation of the past perfect and the past tense. These have to work together. Okay, so past perfect works with the past tense. They always work together. So it's kind of like a little duo happening when you're telling a story using past tense and sequencing. So we reject choice B on those grounds. Choice C, anything wrong with this? You should have read this and been like, really? Nothing wrong? Let me see. I've got my timeline up there. So I know that my first event is being expressed with this past perfect. The birds, they had been attacked by the birds. The second thing, by the time they reached adulthood. Choice C looks really good to us. It clearly is communicating that sequence that we see in our timeline. So there shouldn't have been any confusion there. Now, choice D, again, we have this reach instead of reached, and were attacked by the time they reached. So we would still need the past tense even if we were saying were attacked. We can use were attacked here. That's an okay expression to use the past tense here because we have some sequencing. They were attacked by the birds by the time, it's a lot of prepositions of by and by, but reached needs to be in the past tense. We also have the error here, if that's not enough, that we do not use to refer to humans. So we can reject choice D on those grounds. Choice E, our final choice here. And again, this verb tense-wise is looking good. However, we have by the time they reached adulthood, and I'm a little confused as to what by the time they reached adulthood describes. So this is what I call a confused modifier or a squinting modifier. What is it describing? It's sitting between these two entities. So that communication and that ordering of events is a little muddled here as we don't know what this has really describing to us. So we are going to go with choice C, which the majority of you did. So you're becoming verb experts. And I did see in the chat somewhere that somebody was having sad faces because they only got one question right. And I don't want you guys to worry about getting right or wrong here. It's really learning about these verbs and how to use these verbs to express the meaning and to tell the story. And if you make mistakes here, this is the place to make them because then you will learn from your mistakes and we won't have the mistakes in the future. So question 5 on Michelangelo. So this one is a really, really interesting question. We're going to talk about a fundamental concept here. We're going to get that link popped up for you. And I again want you to think about the story being told in the sentence. It's a simple sentence, but how is it being told and which sentence is telling it correctly? About a minute to work through this one. Okay, about 10 more seconds here. Get those answers locked in. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you understand this fundamental concept. So let's take a look at these two sentences. So sentence 1 is definitely incorrect. Sentence 2 is our correct answer. The reason being here, and the concept that I really want you to think about as we're working through the Michelangelo question. We have a sentence, Joe worked in a company that had been established in 1965. So here we have two events happening, right? Our first event, and our intent is to express two pieces of information. So the first piece is that Joe worked, and the second piece of information is the company was established. Okay, so we have two facts being presented. All right. The question we have to ask ourselves are, do these facts have anything to do with each other? Are they related? Are they, do we need to sequence them? Does the fact that this company was established in 1965 have anything to do with Joe, the fact that Joe worked there? Absolutely not. And we don't need to use the past perfect to sequence events that are not related. We can just use the simple past tense. Okay, so that past perfect tense is only used to sequence related events. If the events have nothing to do with each other, then we are not going to use the past perfect at all. So in the second sentence, Joe worked in the company that was established in 1965. We still have our two facts, but we're not connecting them with using that past perfect. So our reasoning behind rejecting sentence 1 is because our events are not related. So no past perfect is needed. No past perfect when we do not have related events. Okay? Make that note, make that when you're telling a story, if the events are not related, you do not need to connect them with past perfect and put them on the same timeline because they don't belong in the same timeline. Joe working in the company is on a completely different timeline than the company establishing itself, right? Is there that commonality? Yes, but that commonality doesn't mean relation. Okay, so hopefully that is clear to everybody because that's going to become an important thing as we explore this Michelangelo question, because this question is all about testing to see if you really understand these related versus unrelated events. And this is one of the hardest pieces for sentence correction dealing with verbs is, okay, do these things have anything to do with each other? Do they affect each other? And stop and ask yourself that question. How are they related? And make yourself answer those questions. So Michelangelo, it is believed, had made his sculpture of David using an 8-inch plaster model that was recently discovered after being lost for nearly 30 years. Okay, 300 years. Sorry, I can't read today. 300 years. So now we ask ourselves these questions to figure out kind of what is going on. This author's telling me this story about art history, about Michelangelo and David, which is a really impressive sculpture if you're ever in Italy. But how does all of this work together? Is it being expressed and is the story being told to me in the proper way? So I ask myself, what is the belief? Okay. And here the belief is that Michelangelo made the David sculpture using an 8-inch plaster model. Okay. So there is that belief. What was recently discovered? So we can answer that question, the 8-inch model. Okay. So we believe Michelangelo used a plaster model, and then recently a plaster model was discovered. What was lost? The 8-inch plaster model. Okay, so I have all my information, but then I have to really stop and say, is had made the appropriate verb tense here? Are these events connected? So I want you guys to think about that. And that link just popped up in the chat for you guys to answer this question. Is this the appropriate verb tense? This is a quick answer, guys. Let's click on the link and get some answers in here. Yes, no, proper verb tense. Give you guys about 30 seconds. All right, 5 seconds. Let's get a few more responses in here. And that is time. So the majority of you answered this question correctly. So well done. Okay, so is this appropriate verb tense? The recent discovery has no bearing on the action of Michelangelo making David. So no, we do not need to use the past perfect here. These two are not associated. Michelangelo making the David, using this plaster model for whatever purpose, has nothing to do with a discovery that has been recently been made 300 years later. Not related in any way, shape, or form. Okay, they have no effect on one another. So no reason to use the past perfect here. So let's work through and see. Do you guys want to see how you did on these questions? Did we get the stats up here? I see the stats for question 1. Let me go and check for question 2 where we're at. So it looks like 43% of you got this right, which is great news because this is a difficult question. So, there are our stats. So 14% of you landed on choice A. And then choice B, again, 14%. So we had an even split here. And then choice C was 41%. So nicely done there. Choice D was 9%. And choice E, 22%. So we're kind of sprinkled all over the board. So here, with choice A, obviously, if you chose choice A, you missed that piece that there's no association between this discovery and Michelangelo making. We don't need to sequence these. The discovery happened in a completely different timeline than Michelangelo using this to make David. So we absolutely don't need that. Now, choice B, we have a subject verb error here. So this option is stating that the model discovered something, because if you read it carefully, it says an 8-inch plaster model is believed to have been used by Michelangelo for his sculpture of David and recently discovered. So here, this and is connecting these two verbs, and we have this model being discovered. So that's really messing with your meaning here. So if you landed on choice B, you probably missed that meaning piece of it, and you didn't really think through the story that was being told and what each of the characters in the story were doing, so to speak. Choice C is indeed our correct answer. So for those of you that landed on choice C, excellent job. This is a hard question. So a lot of you can see less than 50% accuracy, but it does indeed convey the correct information to us. An 8-inch plaster model believed to have been used. So it had been used in the past, okay, by Michelangelo for a sculpture of David, has been discovered. So after having been lost. So we have lots of this continuity of time, this having been lost. It was lost over the course of time. So that is properly being communicated. So choice C definitely communicates everything in the manner in which we need it to. Now let's take a look at choice D and E. Now choice D, it is believed that an 8-inch plaster model that Michelangelo used. So now we have kind of a split here, and we have the use of this, what we think is meant to be a clause here that is describing to us what is being believed. But if you look, this clause has no verb here. So that's a little bit confusing. And we're missing that, that verb that should be in that clause that is telling us that. And then in choice E, we have this pronoun. I call these my pronoun demons sitting down here, because while everything else looks correct, we have this little tiny pronoun messing everything up. And it was recently discovered after having been lost. So what is it? Are we talking about David? Are we talking about the plaster model? We have lots of question marks here. So if you chose choice E, you probably missed that pronoun reference ambiguity issue. So yes, this is a 700 level question. This is an original official question. So definitely hard on that side, which you can see we have a, I would say, solid accuracy rate, but this is a hard question that lots of students make these kinds of mistakes on, because you really do have to be thinking of the timelines of the events being communicated. Are these events related in the story? Does one have to do with the other? And in this situation, they do not. So as you look at choice D, which is a popular, and we didn't have that many students pick this one in this case, but this is one of the more popular answers, and I've kind of put a similar sentence next to it. It is believed that the Empire State Building, which is a tall building. So we see that we have that missing verb here. And we have, it is believed that an 8-inch plaster model, which was lost for 300 years. So here, there's that lack of verb association, but I'm glad to see a lot of you did not pick that one. And choice E, our second most popular, but make sure you always double check other errors, even if the verbs look good here. Okay, we have to make sure everything else is being communicated clearly. And this is one of those situations where we get down to those two answer choices, and the big things that should be jumping out at us are all taken care of, and we have that one small thing that's going to be the difference between us getting this question right and wrong. And so we have to pay attention to those small details there. So I am not going to spend the time going through choice D, because we had so few people pick choice D in this group. So well done there. You guys were able to see the verb missing. We see a comment. I misunderstood that this sculpture was discovered recently and chose E. Okay, good. I'm glad the explanation helped. So really spending that time with the original sentence and reading it carefully is absolutely going to benefit all of you, because that's how we can keep those misunderstandings from happening. But when they do happen, really recognizing that is important. So here is our correct answer choice. Here is that structure that is giving us the usage that we need. So I want you to observe here how these structures will be repeated. Okay, because once you get familiar with these structures, and as just popped up in the chat, when you're taking the test, 100 to 120 seconds is about the amount of time you take to solve an SC question. So familiarity with structure and recognizing that these structures will be repeated over and over again, that becomes really important, and being comfortable with them as you move through the exam and through your preparation. So you can see the usage. We have this question about David, and then we actually have another question from OG 2021 where you see appear to have been equipped. So again, very similar structure, very similar verb usage being used to communicate a different story. So again, it's all about storytelling. This is telling us the story of Neanderthals. This is telling us the story of Michelangelo. The verbs and the structure will repeat themselves in these little stories that we're getting through these sentences. So don't let them stump you. Don't let them confuse you. Take that time to prepare now, which will decrease your time later because you've become familiar with these structures. Okay? So your learning path, your expectations you should do here, keep revising. The more you revise, the more you work through these official practice questions, the more time you spend on our platform, working with it, or on GMAT Club, looking at those queries, identifying those doubts, analyzing where you're making mistakes, analyzing where those verbs aren't telling the right story, where they aren't communicating, becomes increasingly important. So our takeaways from Sprint 2, thorough meaning analysis. The more you practice it, the quicker you will become. You may feel like you're not doing it as fast as you would like right now, but that will come over time. You will be able to start solving quicker and quicker. And that allows you to really create that framework to evaluate your answer choices. And as we saw today, when we use that meaning analysis and we were like, okay, what is being told here? What is being communicated? We knew what verbs we needed to look for. We knew, does it need to be past tense because we had that hard stop? Does it need to be, a continuing action because it happened over the course of time? Do we have to sequence events? Are they related? And that became very clear through that meaning analysis and that stopping and asking those questions about what kind of story is being told, what kind of events need to be communicated. And while you're reviewing your answer choices, don't get distracted by the variations. Remember, they're going to rearrange those sentences on you. Different structures can be correct. So don't just reject something because it's a variation. Make sure that you know what needs to be communicated, and you have solid reason to reject something. Okay, it has to have a solid error there. You're not going to get two correct answer choices, so reject everything on solid grounds, but also accept the correct answer on solid grounds. Okay, so your next steps, definitely think about that meaning. Take that meaning with you. Always think meaning first. You can't memorize all of the rules. You could try, but you get under pressure. The rules are going to go out the window, especially with verbs, because verbs is all about communication, expression, and meaning. Telling that story using the proper grammar and the proper verbs to communicate that meaning. So don't forget tomorrow, just to emphasize this and drive this point home a little bit more, we have that free supplemental lesson for tomorrow only. It is going to cover all your major tenses. So make sure, get in that chat box, get that link so you can do that, because it's only going to be for tomorrow. So you can have a lovely Saturday morning coffee and work on some verbs. Also, don't forget we have that RC session coming up. You're going to learn the sentence structures, predict thoughts, keywords, summarize, really strengthen, level up as far as your RC skills go to really help improve your score. And again, that link is in the chat. So go ahead and grab that. Make sure you register for that. And what I think is even more important, if those two things weren't great enough, is if you can get a spot with one of our strategy members and get in with our mentor team to help you come up with a personalized study plan, to help you evaluate where you need to focus, where you need to spend your time, where your strengths and weaknesses are, which are really going to help you find your way to that 90th percentile. And this team of mentors is absolutely amazing. I've seen them do some great work with some students. So I couldn't encourage you guys enough to actually click on that link and get a spot, because the spots are limited and it is first come, first serve. So I don't want anybody to miss out on that. And I think that is it for me today. I'm so glad. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all have learned a little bit more about verbs and about how to tell the story using verbs. You feel a little bit more confident, and you'll take access of that free trial tomorrow and extend that knowledge even that much more. And I wish you all the best of luck in your preparations. I'm seeing slots log on. So go ahead and send an email. They support at eGMAT.com and see what they can do about that. You never know. They may be able to help you out with something. I can't say for sure. I am not in charge of that, but it's always worth a shout out to see what was going on. And thank you guys so much. I wish you the best and have a great weekend and work hard